Hello, and welcome to Relationships and Communication with Kiana Sage and Willow McPherson. We're so excited to be presenting to you today our take on how to improve your relationships and communication. Aren't you excited, Willow?
I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled for all of you to join us. This is going to be such a fun class. It's the first one of our series of 3, and I can't wait. This is going to be such good content.
Yes, completely. So why don't we just dive in with, I'll tell them a little bit about me, and then you tell a little bit about you, and we'll just kind of do a little back and forth, and so people can have a sense of who we are and what we're about, and why are we even talking about communication and relationships anyways. And the reason that we're talking about communication and relationships is because everything comes down to communication and how you are in relationship to communication within yourself, because that influences how you're communicating with others. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because repeatedly with my clients, both with one-on-one sessions or group sessions or team development, all the time, the primary issue always comes down to how are we communicating, how are we receiving communication, and how is that impacting our relationships. So Willow and I chatted before this about what we thought the 7 biggest mistakes are. We had a great time coming up with these mistakes, but I want to tell you that I purposefully practice what I preach. I mean, when
You
I'm
are a master of communication.
well, the reason why I think I'm a master is because years and years ago, I was in a relationship where communication was totally fragmented, and we actually went to therapy. And I learned that I was a master miscommunicator.
That's a big realization. It's really big.
Oh my gosh, I thought I was like miscommunicator, but what I realized is that I was communicating. And from that point forward, I made it a real intention to become a better communicator. So, Willow, why don't you share a little bit about you? And before you start, let me just tell you one thing that I think makes Willow so amazing, which is why I wanted us to do this collaboration, is that Willow, by far, hands down, in my life, is the most supportive human being I think I've encountered.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
I've told you that before, but I mean, it's sincere. Like, you are the most supportive person. So anyways,
Thank you
I
so
want
much.
everybody to get to know you like I know you a little bit.
I appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that I truly do mean it, that you are the master communicator and you have a you have a true gift and nuance of, I don't know if it's intuition or it's beyond intuition, but you are able to work with your clients and kind of just see those little ways that there is miscommunication, that there are challenges being had in their personal or professional life. And you just guide your clients like correctly to fix the challenge, and it's really quite amazing. So I love our work together, and I love you, and this is such, I feel you're one of my biggest cheerleaders and support system as well, so thank you. But on the note of communication, I mean, communication is essential in everyday life, but especially with what I do. So when I'm working with natural medicines and I'm sitting one-on-one with the client, or even on the phone or through Zoom with the client, it communication is everything. If I'm not getting the full correct answer, or descriptions even, or they're not being forthcoming or honest, I can't go very far in terms of helping them, because I need to match the correct individualized medicine to them. And so it only goes so far. So good communication is really, really imperative. It's important. And what I do day in and day out is not only communicate and compassionately listen, but I also do muscle testing. So I either surrogate muscle test myself or my client, or if I'm there with them, I muscle test them. And that's just, if you ask me, a physical way of muscle testing as a physical way of communicating. So it's the body's communication as opposed to verbal communication of what's going on.
Oh, can I chime in?
Yes, please.
Because I want to say, the reason why doing something like that is so important for people like us, because we listen to people differently. You said compassionate communication, and I'm going to go into the steps of how to do that and have a solution to fix your communication for sure. But when we listen differently, I think we have different ways to navigate situations, and that changes everything. But
Absolutely.
the muscle testing is really an intuitive way to do things like that, because what people think, and I find this repeatedly. In fact, I had a client this last weekend, and we had an in-person session, and he said, I do a lot of scales, and where are you on a scale of 0 to 10? And he said he was at an 8, and I was like, you're at a 2. Like, because
well, there's no fooling that type of communication, right? There's no fooling that like type of communication, and it goes both ways. I love what you're saying, because like a client will be thinking, oh, I'm great, I'm doing fantastic, and come muscle testing time, and it's like, whoa, you're needing some help. You're like, you're not at a 10, you're like at, like you said, a 2.
Yeah.
But it goes the other way too. I mean, I can't tell you all the schooling and everything that I've done in the books and learning, and I'm like, oh, they need this remedy 100%, and then I go to muscle test them, and they need something totally different for a different reason, because it's almost like tapping into that super consciousness, if that makes sense, as opposed to just like my ego knowledge and knowing.
Right. And, you know, our thinking and our minds can get us so messed up with communication and our relationships, because we're like projecting onto the people. Oh, I think he thinks this, or I took it this way, and we take it personally. So why don't we jump into the 7 mistakes? Because I think these are so fun, and I think it's different than what most people think about when they think about communication relationships. So
for sure.
You want me to go first?
Sure. You want to start?
Okay.
I'll jump in if you're comfortable. I'll just keep jumping.
Hands down, the biggest mistake that people have is that they have really poor boundaries. And so what do I mean by that? They either have too strict of a boundary for communication, like too many rules for people to communicate with them, and it needs to be this particular way, and it needs to sound like this, and that type of thing. So it's too controlling, if you will. And the other is that the boundaries are too weak, meaning that they're so permeable that people feel like they're getting walked all over. So poor boundaries is, like, for me, one of the biggest issues that people have with communication.
I see that a lot with my clients, and I think the boundaries system even goes into like codependent relationships.
Absolutely.
Or those types of I don't want to say personality types, but maybe that is correct, of where you overextend yourself, and then you end up, other people's issues become your issues. I don't know if that speaks to any of our clients or people sitting in on this class, but it's where, you know, it's like, oh, you're sad, then I'm sad. And it's like, you know, too much merging. Does that make sense? Too much merging? Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But that's a state of poor boundaries.
Yeah.
The second is avoiding. So avoiding the conversations that need to happen. I always picture someone dancing around the subject, or not even approaching the subject, changing the subject even. And that is a definite, biggest mistake in communication for sure. It's not even coming to the table.
But what I see with clients in corporate America all the time is, you know, that you have this burning issue, and it's that big elephant in the room, if you will, and nobody wants to touch it, but you know that piece is what needs to be talked about in order to get here. So that's one scenario. The other scenario with avoiding that I also see is like poor behavior from boss to employee, or from employee to employee, and they just avoid telling the person that they need to change their behavior. So it's a total avoiding situation. I
Avoidance.
see it all
Yeah,
the time.
definitely.
The third one, no surprise that I got this one. I'm a reformed, healing, control freak. I still have a little bit of the perfectionism in that, you want to control the whole situation. And the truth of the matter is we don't have any control ever
Is that the
over
truth?
anything. We have influence, but we don't really ever have control. But those
Mhm.
people who are thinking that they need to control the whole conversation, that becomes a big ego situation. And when there's ego to ego, absolutely nobody wins.
And it's also kind of forcing your will on others, which is really not okay in the end,
Correct.
you know? Yeah.
True.
The fourth is confusion and uncertainty, just not having clarity. Misunderstandings happen in this way, and it's just muddled. It's a lot of muddled. You're not understanding the question or the answer or what the other person's saying, and so you're truly not hearing or being heard.
Right, right. Totally agree. And also, a lot of people, when they're projecting on other people, they're unsure of what the outcome will be, and so there's a lot of uncertainty. So that's another mistake that people make, is that they don't have the conversation because they're unclear, or
Right.
where it's going to go, because it could go this way, this way, this way. There's a million ways
It's
conversation
aimless.
can go.
It's such an aimless conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
or it can be for sure.
All right, the next one is a good one. Shutting down. Emotionally shutting down is a huge mistake that people make when it comes to communication relationships, because then it's very difficult to get clear. And it's hard to know what your outcome is going to be, because you're not tapped into, one of the most important things that drives, number one, results, and number two, outcomes, is your emotions. And most people are so shut down that they become, finger pointing and judgment and yelling and all those things, and then you can't even hear. So
That's a shutdown is so huge. I think it happens way more than we imagine. I mean, outside of even just personal, like partnership relationships, right? Like with a significant other, but it's almost like punishing yourself and punishing the other person, And when you withdraw and shut down, it's like there's no winning at all. No one wins at
no,
all.
no, it's done.
Yeah. So number 6 we have is taking things personally, right? Like really taking things personally. And another way to think about this is being defensive, being on the defense. And that's when blaming happens, pointing fingers, it's not my fault, it's not taking responsibility, but ultimately you're not taking responsibility and you're taking it personally, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy. We should have
Yeah.
actually put we should have put them both there. The last and final one is judgment. We have a judgment of the person, the situation, what's going on and occurring. And with that judgment comes, blocks. And
Mhm.
so therefore it's a huge mistake. And in fact, when I say that Willow is one of the most supportive people, I think one of the things that makes her so supportive is, number one, she does listen compassionately, which means she's open. And when you're open, you can't have judgment. And I don't think I've ever felt judgment when I'm speaking with Willow about anything. And it's just true acceptance. And so, you know, no
Thank you.
judgment about a situation.
And I would add to the judgment, I think a lot of self-judgment can come in, possibly,
Oh, for sure.
depending on your personality. I mean, or situation, even just situation. Because I can think of situations I go into with communication, and there's a fear of being judged, harshly or however,